Hello and welcome to Cut Through the Noise with me, Aisling O'Rourke. This is the podcast for business leaders who want to increase your sales and elevate your brand through impactful communication and marketing. Here in Cut Through the Noise, we don't just talk theory, we deliver actionable advice to help you connect with your audience and grow your business. Thank you so much for tuning into the show once again this week. And if you're new to the podcast, please don't forget to check out our back catalogue of Cut Through the Noise. If you're a regular listener, we do appreciate if you can leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify, or if you prefer to use Apple, a review always helps spread the word about our podcast. Remember, while content may be king, clarity is key to helping you cut through the noise and stand out from the crowd. And that's what we like to focus on here on the podcast. Now, today we have a very special guest. We have a woman who does photography, but more than just a portrait, it's brand photography in its entirety. And I'm delighted to be joined by the portrait boss, Caroline Murray. Caroline, you are very welcome to Cut Through the Noise.
Thank you, Aisling. I'm delighted to be here.
So, Caroline, when it comes to photography, it can be a bit overwhelming. And I think, let's be honest about it. Most people think of themselves as photographers now because we all have a smartphone. So how hard can it really be? But when you're putting your brand out there into the world, if you don't look the part, you yourself, the brand in its entirety, you're just not going to make sales. So talk to me about brand photography. What exactly is it?
I suppose brand photography is about communicating to your audience, not just who you are, but what you do and actually why it matters. Principally, I would consider myself a portrait photographer because that's formatively always what I did. It's always, I think, where my craft began. Like I spent 20 years in the darkroom working with film and always shooting portraits. And then I think in the last few years, I came to recognize just the power and influence of a sitting portrait and actually how it could really kind of capture an audience and also distill the essence of who somebody is within that one seating. I just think it's kind of remarkable. It's formidable even, it's an outstanding kind of medium to communicate the essence of somebody. What I try to do is kind of filter through all the noise and consider actually who is the brand, what are their goals, what are their objectives. I do this principally through a very detailed brand questionnaire, and it makes the sitter or the client have to kind of investigate what their goals are, what their vision is for their brand, and how they want to be perceived, like what their messaging might be. And actually that's pivotal because I think we have a kind of a perceived persona or an idea of actually how we appear to our clients. But in fact, actually how we do appear can be often quite different. I also work with women who are going through a lot of change. Predominantly I'm working with women kind of in their 40s, 50s and 60s. And I think it's a really transformative part of a woman's life. And I think so much is happening both personally and in their business. So it could be a divorce or a separation, or it could be actually leaving an industry and actually moving into a new career. It could be founding your own company. So I think it's a very kind of empowering moment for a woman. A lot of change is happening. And I think how visually she communicates the essence of that is super important. And I help to coach and form and kind of build a vision kind of around that. Often through the brand strategy, I ask questions around even just your palette, so your coloring or your body size. So I think the styling is incredibly important. Like I'm totally obsessed with lighting and posing, and they're so important. But I think what you're wearing is so important as well.
Style. It has the power to make or break the brand imagery, like what you decide to wear, how you put it front and center, and how confident you are in doing that. Now, for listeners' benefit, if you go to communicationscoach.ie and you see all that brand photography, that's Caroline's work. Okay. So I had the pleasure of being one of Caroline's models in the last year for my own work. And I have to say, I've trained as a photographer, I've trained as a journalist. Putting myself in front of camera was never my ambition. And I know, Caroline, I probably drove you mad beforehand because I was very nervous about it. And I do think like having that opportunity with the questionnaire in particular beforehand, to sit down and think, what do I want from this? What do I need from this, from my business? What do I need my business to look like? It's a great way to prepare. And then from a communications perspective, you know what the client is expecting. So if there are any misconceptions before it even starts, you can correct that.
Absolutely. I kind of feel that administrative or sort of pre-shoot consultation is so important. And I love that. Like I aim to only shoot about twice a month. So I create all of that space to really kind of hold the client, to make them feel seen and understood. Like I was shop virtually for my client. I put Pinterest boards together. Like we are WhatsApping over what looks. They're pulling things from their wardrobe. They're out shopping and typically stepping out of their comfort zone, because often the styling, now you know style, Aisling. I mean, you know that you're a winter and you wear diamond colors and you always look incredible. So you know what looks good on you and you wear it and you really own it. A lot of women just don't, and it's okay. And they might just not feel comfortable in that space. So I often find that that coaching, which I adore doing around styling it's important, but it's also really valuable in my clients. It's an additional piece that I just think sets the whole look up. It also means that when they arrive to the shoot location, which is also a very important part to kind of curate, but when they arrive, they have possibly a whole new wardrobe and they have 5 looks that they are confident about, nervous about putting on, but you know what I mean? They're feeling fresh, you know? And of course, we're building that wardrobe around what their brand messaging is. So I know from my shoot map, right? So if I'm only shooting packages that are 3, 9, and 20. So they're small packages, but I know exactly where each portrait is going. So if we're shooting 9 portraits, they're environmental. So obviously there's a lifestyle element as well. We'll be incorporating props within the location, but we're going to know whether that's going to be a 16:9, the hero shot on the website, or whether that's part of a carousel that they're going to be putting up on LinkedIn as part of a strategy that they're running to maybe launch a podcast or maybe launch, it could be just even a newsletter. It need not matter. But the context is important. So knowing the style of photograph that I'm taking in the particular wardrobe that we have curated within the location, which we have also curated, is just part of that administration pre-shoot love that I pour into each of my shoots. Super important. Love all of that.
And I think what makes you perhaps different from others in the field, you come as well with a graphic design background.
Oh, yeah.
You are very aware of maybe perhaps the logo or the brand imagery that's currently there and making sure that everything aligns, that the end product is consistent with the overall brand.
Yeah, that's a really exciting piece for me because, I'm a designer and I've been teaching design for almost 23 years. So sort of working with students and helping them to create a vision around what their ideas are is really important. And all that divergent thinking is super, super incredible and important. But I think also convergently pouring these ideas back into a brief for a client and ensuring that the visuals we create solves the objective. Like, what is the problem that we're trying to solve here? And it's a communication problem. It's a branding issue. And it needs strategy. It needs curation. So I love working with clients at a stage where they have, now I don't like doing it siloed, and often that can be the place. It can be, we don't know where brand photography fits. Should we have our brand identity completed, which means probably having brand strategy worked on already? Should we be in the process of building, a website? I like to come in where you've been working with a designer, where there is a logo, sort of conceived, where you do have a brand board. You know what your brand colors are. You've sort of recognized what your fonts are. You have a simple brand board identifying all those elements. So your assets are in place. When I then know what they are, I can very seamlessly kind of work photography into fit the styling or the art direction that you have employed into your website and onto your identity, So typically, get your logo organized, be working with designer for your website. I then come in and I make photographs elevate and just cohesively bring this whole brand strategy together. That's where I love to be.
As someone who's used to being behind the camera and, we're living in a social media world. So for you, what makes a striking photograph or brand imagery, say for the likes of Instagram or TikTok or LinkedIn? Like, what do you think will stop scroll when you're putting your client work together? What is it that it really needs?
It's connection every single time. I mean, the lighting could be immaculate, the styling could be immaculate, the pose could be perfect for the body form. But if I'm not getting that connection in the eyes, I don't choose that photograph. So I might shoot 100 frames. And then when it comes to actually choosing or doing that edit, which I spent a long time doing it, I'll do an edit, I'll come back, do a second edit, come back, do a third edit. but I'm always looking for that eye connection. And anyone that has worked with me, I'm always like, connect with me, just waiting for those eyes to really deeply connect, because you're connecting with your client. Like, yes, you're connecting with me as I stand behind the lens, I'm taking your photograph, but you're talking to your demographic, you're speaking to your audience. And I think for them to feel that kind of level of authenticity and for them to feel sort of seen and heard, they're going to want to know that the person that they're investing in or they're becoming a client of recognize what those needs are. And I think that that connection and contact through the eyes is the number one for me.
It can be challenging, I think. Like, it's one thing if you're in a large corporation where I know you do work with corporates on their brand shoots as well. But if you're, and there's like the rise in recent years of the solopreneur, and I kind of hate that word, but the single business person who might be working from home, who doesn't necessarily have an office to have their photograph taken in. And, it can be really challenging to figure out, well, actually, how do I make sitting at a computer look interesting? I think people can be very afraid. They don't know how to do it. So they might be afraid to make contact with you because they know they need the images, but they don't know what they need to look like or how to do it to showcase their work. So how do you bridge that barrier?
Okay, so it's all perception, isn't it? I mean, how we want to be perceived by our client is perception. So it's the messaging that we're curating that we want, how we want to be understood. So I simulate that. I mean, that's why when we're actually looking at having a shoot, and most of my clients are solopreneurs, they're entrepreneurs, they work from home. I mean, we're in the post-COVID era. Very few people are in town renting beautiful offices, and most people are working on their own, and they have people on contract for them. So this is a lot of who I work with. So I shoot in loads of really beautiful places, typically in Dublin. So I work with Iconic, Glandore, Grafter. They have gorgeous meeting rooms. I will typically, in response to the brand questionnaire, once understanding what the messaging is, I will have about 7 or 8 locations, and I will decide which location will echo the messaging of this brand, will communicate that individual's story most effectively and let their audience know what their why is, okay? So once we have that, we then go to this location. So I simply just sort of book that meeting room for the day. We set everything up. So we're in fact creating an environment that is the office. Yeah. So we have a desk, we have the podcast mic, we have the MacBook Pro, we have all the paraphernalia that you would use in your home office. And we set that up. And again, this is perception. This is the story. This is the storytelling, is it not? I mean, if brand photography could just be shot in someone's home with their bed beside them and their dog under their table, you know what I mean? We'd all do it. That's mostly how we work. But that kind of perception is super important, the story we're telling. So I do that. I build that kind of narrative.
And it helps as well, like people who are solopreneurs in particular, and they do work from home, or even people who are in corporates, but they're hybrid workers. You create that professional boundary and you keep your personal space personal and private to you. It does not need to be part of it. You can, there is an option available through like something like this with the portrait bot.
Yeah.
So Caroline, what then, like, as I said, it can be nerve wracking, like it's an investment. And one of the things that I see when I'm working with my clients on their websites, the imagery looks dated. And as much as we'd all love to look like we did in our healthy teenage years, which is probably the healthiest we'll ever look, we change as our bodies change over time. So how frequently should we be looking at renewing our brand photography? What kind of lifespan can it have?
Yeah. So typically when I'm working with women now, kind of in their 40s or 50s, probably in their 50s, they might have had corporate images shot in their 40s. So most that I work with, the portrait, the single sort of headshot that they're using is a decade old. So for me, I like to shoot and that there's a lasting effect with these portraits. I mean, we're kind of looking at what is your 5-year plan? Do you know what I mean? If you think you have a vision in 5 years of actually having a podcast, let's shoot for that. Okay. So you'll have portraits that'll work for that context when you actually go to pivot and have that podcast. I think people should be updating their brand photography. And I think as they evolve as individuals, as business people, their ecosystem evolves. The people that they're talking to, their audience is changing all of the time. Like, I mean, I know even where I was 4 or 5 years ago, my audience has changed slightly. I want to kind of renew my photography to ensure that I'm talking to that demographic, that I'm creating sort of empathy with that demographic, that I'm feeling authentic to that demographic. That's really important. So if you feel your brand images aren't aligned with your goal and with your audience, you need to change it, because the value of that is just, it's incredible, you know? And actually I find that actually when clients have even a small catalog of images, they then begin to market hard. Yeah, they're on LinkedIn. They might have only been on LinkedIn, but suddenly they're on Instagram. You know, we're on these highly visual platforms. They could even be on Pinterest. They might even chance TikTok, you know, because suddenly they have a catalog of images that they want to market with. And they're reaching these goals. Whatever the 5-year plan was, they're actually reaching it there. They're getting there faster because they're feeling braver and they're feeling more confident and they're feeling more empowered. And that really is my fundamental purpose. It is about empowering women. I love, love, love that part of what I do. I love having a sitter in the space that we've created for them and feeling them just grow, you know, feeling them just blossom. And they might have never had a photograph taken like this before. And it feels like a legacy print, which I would love more Irish women to want to invest in. We don't, unfortunately, it's not who we are. But if we can do that through brand photography, I will use that as a vehicle for that.
I have to say, I've never had an experience like being photographed by you. And I was high afterwards. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I was dead nervous going into it. But afterwards, I just felt wonderful at the end of the shoot. And then, like a week or two later, or whatever it was, when you handed over the images, it kind of made me step back and look at myself differently. It gave me, I suppose, perhaps a fresh perspective on the business that I run and how I'm communicating to what I do to the world. So I can't say how much I got from the experience, because I'm still using, like 12 months on, I'm still using images and I still love them. And I never thought I'd say that about a photograph about myself. And as an Irish woman, like, we're not trained to say these things about ourselves. So I highly recommend Caroline Murray's services. But for people listening, Caroline, how do they get in contact with you or even see examples of your work?
So my website has finally launched. So I did a massive redesign. So that's up and running in the last probably 8 weeks. And sort of interesting the traction I've gotten from that already. But it's www.portraitboss.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Caroline Murray. My Instagram handle is @portrait.boss, I think. Yeah, so you can contact me through my website. You can DM me, however means you feel you'd like to contact me. That's fine.
In fairness, if you just simply Google portrait boss Caroline Murray, she's on every platform list. We'll have no trouble finding her. Caroline, thank you so much for joining us on Cut with Noise. Absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. As I said, my first podcast, but I've really loved it. Thank you for making me feel very safe and comfortable, Aisling.
Well, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Caroline Murray of Portrait Boss. Please do check out her work. I would highly recommend it. We will be back next week with another episode of Cut Through the Noise, but don't forget to check out our back catalogue. If I can be of any help with your communications and marketing strategies, get in contact with me either by LinkedIn, I'm just Aisling O'Rourke, or thecommunicationscoach.ie. And remember, while content may well be king, clarity is key if you want to cut through the noise and stand out the crowd.